Am I the a-hole for kicking my stepdad out his house and contesting my mom's will? I'm 31 years old, and instead of focusing on my own life, I am currently embroiled in a multinational legal battle over a house in France and the legacy of a woman I barely recognized by the time she died. To understand why I'm considering something as drastic as contesting a will and essentially making my stepfather homeless, you have to understand the sheer devastation of the last few years. My sister, 34, and I grew up in a very standard, happy home. My parents were together for 28 years. My mom, 57, was my best friend. We talked every day. She was the person I went to for everything. My dad, 68, is a quiet, hardworking man who worshipped the ground she walked on. Then 7 years ago, the floor fell out from under us. It wasn't just one affair. It was a calculated, long-term series of betrayals. When the truth finally came out, my mom didn't apologize. She didn't try to fix things. She scorched the earth. She became a person I didn't know, cold, defensive, and incredibly cruel. She met a man through her travels, someone who is, to put it lightly, the opposite of my father. He has no children, a significant drinking problem, and a gambling habit that seemed to swallow my mom's common sense whole. She left the country. She moved to France with him, leaving my dad in the middle of a savage divorce where she tried to strip him of every penny he had earned over 3 decades. My sister and I became estranged from her during this time. We couldn't wrap our heads around the abuse she started hurling at us for siding with our father. For years, my inbox was a graveyard of vitriol. I would get emails from her at 3 a.m. calling me ungrateful, telling me I was the reason her life had been miserable, and saying she never wanted to see us again. But the worst part was her partner. He started joining in. I have saved letters and texts from him that would make your skin crawl. He called my sister and me names I won't repeat here. He told us we were poison and that my dad was a pathetic loser. He blamed us for my mom's unhappiness, claiming we shackled her to a life she hated. Then the news came. Cancer. When you hear your mother is terminal, the years of abuse suddenly feel like a secondary issue. Life is short. My sister and I reached out. We wanted to reconcile, or at least find some semblance of peace before the end. We visited. We tried to ignore the fact that her partner was always in the corner, nursing a drink and looking at us with pure hatred. We tried to focus on the woman who used to tuck us in at night, even though she now looked like a stranger. The end happened much faster than anyone expected. During a brief visit back to England, my mom's condition plummeted. She was hospitalized, and it became clear she wasn't going to make it. 2 days before she passed away, while she was heavily medicated and barely conscious in a hospital bed, she and her partner got married. No one was invited. No family was told until after the paperwork was signed. It felt like a final, desperate grab for her estate. When she died, we discovered the final version of her will. She had changed everything without a word to us. She left the entirety of her estate, the house in France, her savings, everything, to him. A man she had known for 3 years. A man who had spent those 3 years helping her alienate her own children. I felt like I had been erased. However, because the majority of her assets and her primary residence were in France, French law applies. And this is where the complicated part kicks in. In France, you cannot simply disinherit your children. There is a legal concept called law réserve héréditaire. It essentially means that children are protected heirs. A parent cannot legally give away the portion of their estate that is reserved for their children, regardless of what the will says, especially when the marriage was so new and the circumstances so questionable. My sister and I flew to France to meet with a lawyer. The house is beautiful, a quiet, stone cottage that my mom bought using the money she took from my dad in the divorce. Walking through those rooms was surreal. Her partner was there, already acting like the lord of the manor. He didn't even offer us a glass of water. He just sat there, smelling of stale wine, telling us we had no right to be there. The lawyer sat us down and laid it out. Under French law, my sister and I actually own a significant portion of that house and the estate. The will, as it's written, is largely unenforceable regarding the reserved portion for us. Here is the dilemma. I don't want to be a monster. I don't want to be the person who kicks someone out onto the street. But I also look at this man, a man who encouraged my mother to hate me, a man who insulted my father, a man who has a gambling problem and will likely lose that house to a debt collector within 2 years, and I feel a burning sense of justice. We made an offer. We told him we would be willing to go thirds. We would sell the house, give him his third of the value so he could find a place of his own, and my sister and I would take our legal shares. He lost his mind. He started screaming that we were vultures, that we were disrespecting her memory, and that he would never leave. He claims that since they were married, the house is his, and he'll fight us until he's dead. He's back to sending the abusive texts, telling me I'm a greedy bitch who never loved my mother. My family is split. Some say I should just let it go for the sake of peace. They say my mom wanted him to have it, so I should respect her wishes, even if she was of unsound mind or under his influence at the end. They say that contesting the will makes me look like I'm only after the money. But then I think about my dad. I think about the 28 years he spent building a life with a woman who tried to leave him with nothing. I think about the thousands of pounds my sister and I have spent on travel and legal fees just to be treated like intruders in our own mother's legacy. If we don't contest this, he stays in that house. He drinks away the equity. He gambles away the savings my mother spent her life accumulating. He stays in a house that was bought with my father's hard-earned money while hurling insults at us from across the channel. I told the lawyer to proceed with the claim. If he won't agree to the third split, we will exercise our full legal right to the property. In France, if the heirs cannot agree on the usage of a property, a judge can order a licitation, a forced sale. He would be legally required to vacate, so the property can be sold and the proceeds distributed. I feel cold. I feel like I'm becoming the person she was during the divorce. I'm 31 years old, and I'm talking about forced sales and protected heirs. I stay up at night reading French civil codes and looking at old photos of my mom when she was still my mom. My sister is fully on board. She's more angry than I am. She wants him out yesterday. She remembers the specific email he sent her when she was pregnant, telling her she'd be a terrible mother just like our mom was forced to be. She has no mercy left. But I still have that nagging voice in my head. Am I the asshole for using a legal loophole, even if it's the law of the land, to override my mother's written wishes? Am I the asshole for wanting to kick this man out of the only home he has left? I loved her for 26 years. I hated who she became for the last 4. And now, I'm the one holding the legal hammer that could destroy the only thing she had left. It's not just about the money. It's about the fact that this man spent 3 years trying to delete us from her life. It feels like if I let him have this, he wins. He wins the narrative that we didn't matter. He wins the prize for being the one who stood by her, while he was actually the one driving the wedge. I'm tired of being the bigger person. The bigger person gets nothing but abusive emails and a sense of moral superiority that doesn't pay the bills or fix a broken heart. So, tell it to me straight. Is it vulture behavior to contest a will when the law is on your side, but the deceased's intent was clearly against you? Or am I just finally standing up for myself and my sister after years of being the family punching bag? The legal process has started. There's no turning back now unless I withdraw the claim. My fiancé says I'm doing the right thing, that I'm protecting my family's future. My dad just sighs and says he wants me to be happy, but I can see the flicker of vindication in his eyes when I talk about the French lawyer's advice. I'm prepared for the fallout. I'm prepared for the stepdad to go to the local French papers and claim he's being bullied. I'm prepared for the family members who haven't spoken to me in years to chime in with their opinions. But mostly, I'm just sad. I'm sad that this is how it ends. No tearful goodbye, no peaceful transition. Just a cold house in France and a lawyer's bill. Am I the a-hole for taking my share? Update. Things escalated almost immediately after I told the lawyer to proceed. What I thought would be a slow, structured legal process turned into something much more aggressive on his end. Within days, the tone shifted from hostility to outright retaliation. The first thing he did was refuse any further direct communication unless it was through his own lawyer, but that didn't stop him from continuing to send messages anyway. They came late at night, early in the morning, sometimes multiple in a row. The content didn't change much. It was the same pattern of insults, accusations, and attempts to provoke a reaction. He framed himself as a grieving husband being targeted by greedy children, and he made it clear he intended to fight everything. Not long after that, he started making things difficult in more practical ways. When we tried to arrange access to the house to retrieve personal items that belonged to our mom, he denied entry. The lawyer had to get involved just to schedule a supervised visit. Even then, he stayed in the house the entire time, hovering, watching everything we touched. It didn't feel like going through a family home. It felt like being monitored in a place we had every right to be. During that visit, it became clear how much control he had already tried to assert. Certain documents were missing. Some of our mom's personal belongings had been moved or were no longer there. When asked, he either dismissed it or claimed he didn't know where things were. That raised concerns on our lawyer's side about asset dissipation, which added another layer to the case. From there, the legal process moved into a more formal phase. He filed to challenge our claim, arguing that the marriage, even though it happened just before her death, entitled him to full ownership under his interpretation of the law. He also attempted to paint a picture of us as estranged daughters who only returned when money was involved. That narrative was repeated consistently in his filings. At the same time, he started reaching out to extended family members. People we hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about what we were doing. Some of them contacted us directly, repeating his version of events almost word for word. Others chose to stay silent, but made it clear through indirect comments that they didn't support us. It created a kind of background pressure that was hard to ignore. The situation in France became more tense as the weeks went on. He refused to maintain the property in any meaningful way. Neighbors began to complain about the condition of the house. There were reports of loud arguments, late-night disturbances, and general neglect. Our lawyer advised documenting everything, as it could become relevant if the court needed to intervene regarding the management of the property. Financially, he also started to make questionable decisions. There were indications that he was attempting to leverage parts of the estate for short-term gain. That raised concerns about debts being attached to the property, which could complicate the eventual distribution. The legal team moved to put safeguards in place to prevent further issues, but it required additional filings and, of course, more costs. At one point, he attempted to delay proceedings by claiming health issues. That resulted in a temporary pause, but it didn't hold for long. When the case resumed, his approach shifted again. He began pushing for a settlement that heavily favored him, far beyond the thirds arrangement we had originally proposed. It was clear he wasn't interested in compromise unless it gave him control. The court process itself was slow and procedural. There were hearings focused on establishing the validity of the will under French law, the timing of the marriage, and the rights of protected heirs. Our lawyer presented a detailed case, outlining the legal framework and how it applied to our situation. The concept of reserved inheritance was central, and it became increasingly clear that the law was on our side in terms of entitlement. He tried to counter that by questioning our relationship with our mom in her final years, suggesting that estrangement should factor into the decision. That argument didn't carry much weight legally, but it was part of a broader attempt to influence perception. Outside of court, his behavior didn't improve. If anything, it became more erratic. There were incidents where he showed up unexpectedly when we were in France for legal meetings. He would linger nearby, sometimes trying to engage, other times just watching. It created an atmosphere that was difficult to navigate. At one stage, he attempted to involve local media. A small regional outlet ran a piece about a widower being forced out of his home by foreign heirs. It didn't name us directly, but the details were specific enough that it was obvious who it referred to. Our lawyer advised not responding publicly, as it could complicate the case. The emotional toll of all of this was significant. It wasn't just the legal battle itself, but the constant presence of conflict. Every step forward seemed to trigger another reaction from him. There were moments where it felt endless, like it would never resolve in a clean or final way. Despite that, the case continued to move forward. Over time, the court began to narrow the focus to the core legal issues. The validity of the will was partially upheld, but only within the limits allowed by French inheritance law. That meant the reserved portion for my sister and me could not be overridden, regardless of the will's wording. Once that was established, the question shifted to what would happen with the property. Because there was no agreement between the parties, the option of a forced sale became the most likely outcome. Our lawyer filed for it, and after further proceedings, the court approved. That decision marked a turning point. It meant that he would no longer be able to remain in the house indefinitely. A timeline was set for the sale, along with requirements for vacating the property. He attempted to appeal, which caused another delay, but the appeal did not change the outcome. The period leading up to the sale was difficult. He resisted the process at every step, from property evaluations to scheduling viewings. There were additional legal interventions required to ensure compliance. Eventually, enforcement measures were put in place. When the property was finally sold, the proceeds were distributed according to the legal framework. My sister and I received our shares, and he received his portion as determined by the court. It wasn't the outcome he wanted, but it was the one enforced. After everything, there wasn't a sense of victory in the way people might expect. It was more of a conclusion to a long, exhausting process. The house was no longer a point of contention. The legal battle was over. But the circumstances that led to it didn't feel resolved in any emotional sense. He has not attempted further contact since the sale was finalized. Whether that is permanent or temporary remains to be seen, but for now, there is distance. My sister feels justified in the outcome. She views it as a necessary step to correct what she sees as a deliberate attempt to exclude us. My dad has expressed relief that the situation is no longer ongoing. For him, it closes a chapter that began years ago. As for me, the situation is less clear-cut. The process forced decisions that I might not have made under different circumstances, but once it started, there wasn't a way to step back without giving up entirely. What remains is the reality of what happened. A relationship that ended long before the legal process began, a series of choices that led to this outcome, and a resolution that came through the system rather than any form of agreement. The original question about whether it was wrong to take my share feels different now. The focus shifted from a moral dilemma to a legal and practical one very quickly. In the end, it wasn't about taking something extra. It was about enforcing what the law already defined as ours. The situation with him, the conflict, the public narrative he tried to create, all of that became part of the process rather than something separate from it. It was messy, drawn out, and at times overwhelming, but it did reach an end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.